I trusted him like a father, so when my uncle called me crying, begging for $25,000 to save a life, I didn't question it. But a week later, I found out there was no emergency, just a wedding. And I was the one who paid for it. Disclaimer. This is a fictional story created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons, events, or situations is purely coincidental. The evening had been unusually quiet, the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel louder than it really is. I was sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, trying to unwind after a long day. Nothing felt urgent. Nothing felt wrong. Then suddenly, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw my uncle's name flashing. It wasn't strange for him to call, but something about the timing felt off. He rarely called this late, and never with urgency. I answered almost immediately. "Hello?" What I heard on the other end made my chest tighten. His breathing was uneven, like he had been running or crying. His voice, usually calm and confident, sounded shaky and desperate. I don't know what to do," he said, his words breaking apart. "There's been an emergency. It's really bad." My heart started racing. "What happened?" I asked, sitting up straight, suddenly alert. He hesitated for a moment, like he was struggling to find the right words. "Someone close. They need immediate medical help," he said. "It's serious, life or death." I wouldn't ask you if it wasn't urgent. There was something about the way he said it that made it feel real. Raw. Urgent. I didn't question him, not even for a second. This was my uncle, the same man who had always been there, during family gatherings, the one who gave advice, who made everyone laugh. I had never known him to sound this helpless. "How much do you need?" I asked quickly. There was a pause, longer this time. I could hear him exhale slowly before he spoke again. 25,000, he said quietly, almost like he was ashamed to say it out loud. "I know it's a lot. I wouldn't ask unless it was absolutely necessary. I don't have time to arrange it any other way." $25,000. The number echoed in my mind. It was a huge amount, more than I had ever given anyone. It wasn't money I could easily replace. It represented years of savings, careful planning, and sacrifices. For a brief moment, doubt tried to creep in. Questions formed at the edge of my thoughts. What exactly happened? Who was sick? Why so sudden? But they never fully developed. Because fear spoke louder than logic. What if someone dies because I hesitated? That thought hit me hard. I imagined a hospital room, machines beeping, doctors waiting, time slipping away. The idea that I could prevent something terrible and choosing not to felt unbearable. "I'll send it," I said firmly. Relief flooded his voice instantly. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I promise, I'll explain everything later. I just need to handle this right now." He quickly gave me the transfer details. I grabbed my laptop with slightly trembling hands, my mind moving faster than my body. I logged into my bank account, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for just a second. Before I started entering the information, my heart pounded as I typed in the amount, $25,000. Seeing it on the screen made it feel even more real, more serious. I double-checked the details. Everything seemed correct. Still, there was a strange heaviness in my chest, like something was trying to warn me. But I pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for doubt. This was family. I clicked send. The confirmation message appeared almost instantly. The money was gone. "I sent it," I said into the phone, my voice quieter now. He let out a long breath, like a weight had been lifted off him. "You saved us," he said. "I won't forget this. I'll call you soon, okay? I just have to take care of everything here." "Okay," I replied softly. The call ended shortly after that. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen long after it went dark. The room felt different now, heavier somehow. My thoughts started to slow down, and the adrenaline that had pushed me into action began to fade. In its place, a strange mix of emotions settled in: worry, exhaustion, and something I couldn't quite name. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept returning to the same questions. Who was in danger? Why hadn't he explained clearly? Why did it feel so rushed? I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had helped when it counted. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, my imagination filled in the gaps with worst-case scenarios. Hospital corridors, doctors speaking in urgent tones, lives hanging by a thread. I kept checking my phone, expecting an update, hoping for good news. But no message came. Hours passed. The silence stretched longer than it should have. And deep down, beneath all the concern and rational thinking, a quiet unease began to grow subtle, persistent, and impossible to ignore. The next morning, the first thing I did was reach for my phone. I hadn't even fully opened my eyes yet, but my mind was already racing. I expected to see a message from my uncle, an update. A simple, "Everything is okay." Or at least something to explain what had happened after I sent the money. But there was nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no sign that anything had changed since the night before. I told myself not to panic. It had only been a few hours. If it really was a serious medical emergency, he was probably too busy dealing with doctors, paperwork, and whatever crisis was unfolding. People don't stop to send updates in those situations. That made sense. At least, that's what I kept repeating in my head. Still, the silence felt strange. I tried to go about my usual routine, but everything felt slightly off. I made breakfast and barely touched it. I opened my laptop for work, but I couldn't focus on anything for more than a few minutes. My thoughts kept drifting back to the same place. I kept imagining scenarios, each one more stressful than the last. Every notification sound made my heart jump, only for me to feel a small drop of disappointment when it wasn't him. By midday, I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. I picked up my phone and called him. It rang once, twice. Then it went to voicemail. I frowned, staring at the screen. Maybe he was still busy. Maybe he didn't hear the call. That was normal, I told myself. But something about it made me uneasy. I waited a few minutes, then tried again. This time the call didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail. A small knot formed in my stomach. I sent him a message instead. "Hey, just checking in. Is everything okay?" I stared at the screen, watching the message sit there, unread. Minutes passed, then an hour. No response. The silence was starting to feel louder than any words. I tried to distract myself again, but it wasn't working anymore. The worry had shifted into something sharper, more uncomfortable. It wasn't just concern for whoever was supposedly in danger. It was a growing sense that something didn't add up. By evening, I decided to try once more. I called again, hoping maybe things had calmed down enough for him to respond. Voicemail. That same empty, automated voice greeting me like nothing was wrong. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't normal. Even in the middle of a crisis, people find a moment, a single second, to send a quick update. A simple, "We're still at the hospital," or "I'll call you later." But there was nothing. Not even a single word. I looked back at our last conversation in my mind, replaying it piece by piece. His voice. The pauses. The urgency. At the time, it had all felt real. But now, with the silence stretching longer, small details started to stand out in a different way. Things I hadn't questioned before suddenly felt off. Why hadn't he said who was in danger? Why had everything felt so rushed? Why had he disappeared completely after getting the money? I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts away. It felt wrong to doubt him. He was family. You don't question family in moments like that. You trust them. But trust doesn't silence questions. It just delays them. The next day, I woke up with the same uneasy feeling sitting heavy in my chest. Again, I checked my phone. Still nothing, no missed calls, no messages. It was like the call from that night had never happened. This time, I didn't wait as long. I called him again first thing in the morning. Voicemail. I tried a second time. Voicemail. A third time. Still nothing. Now the worry had turned into something closer to frustration. I wasn't asking for much. Just a simple update. Something to let me know that the situation was real, that the money had actually gone where it was needed. I sent another message. Can you please update me? I'm really worried. The message stayed unread. Hours passed, and the silence only grew heavier. I started pacing around my apartment, unable to sit still. My mind kept circling the same thoughts, each one leading to another question, another doubt. Finally, I decided to reach out to someone else. If there really had been a medical emergency, someone in the family would know. News like that doesn't stay hidden. It spreads quickly, especially in close families like ours. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at my aunt's name, his wife. If anyone knew what was going on, it would be her. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the call button. A part of me didn't want to make the call. It felt like crossing a line, like admitting that I didn't fully trust him. But the silence had already pushed me too far. I pressed call. She answered after a few rings, her voice calm and normal, nothing like what I had expected. Hello? Hi, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. I just wanted to check, how is everything? I heard there was an emergency. There was a pause on the other end. Not the kind of pause filled with emotion or stress, but confusion. What emergency? She asked. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For a second, I couldn't even respond. The medical situation? I said slowly. He called me. He said someone needed urgent help. Another pause, then a small, uncertain laugh. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Everything is fine here. The room suddenly felt colder. I stood there, holding the phone tightly, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. Everything is fine. The words echoed in my head, clashing violently with the panic and urgency I had heard the night before. Are you sure? I asked, my voice quieter now. Yes, she replied. There's no emergency. Why? I didn't answer right away, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. The worry I had been feeling started to change shape, turning into something sharper, something heavier. Doubt was no longer a small, quiet voice in the back of my mind. It was loud now, impossible to ignore. The call with my aunt didn't just confuse me. It unsettled me in a way I couldn't easily shake off. Her tone had been calm, almost casual, like I had asked about something completely ordinary. There was no panic in her voice, no hint of stress, no sign that anything serious had happened. It didn't match the urgency I had heard from my uncle the night before. The contrast between the two conversations kept replaying in my mind, over and over again, like something I was trying to solve but couldn't quite figure out. I sat down slowly, staring at my phone as if it might suddenly explain everything. Maybe there had been some misunderstanding. Maybe my uncle hadn't told her yet. That seemed unlikely. But I held on to the possibility anyway because the alternative felt too uncomfortable to accept. If there really was no emergency, then what had that call been? And why would he lie about something so serious? I decided not to jump to conclusions just yet. Instead, I told myself I needed more information. One conversation wasn't enough to confirm anything. There had to be another explanation, something that made sense of both sides. So I started reaching out to other family members, carefully choosing my words, trying not to sound suspicious. I called my cousin first. We spoke casually at the beginning, talking about normal things. But eventually, I brought it up. Hey, have you heard about any emergency in the family recently? I asked, trying to sound neutral. There was a brief pause, followed by a confused response. No. What kind of emergency? My heart sank slightly, but I kept going. Like a medical situation or something urgent? No, they replied. Everything's been normal. Why? I brushed it off quickly, saying I must have misunderstood something, but inside, the unease grew stronger. That was two people now, both unaware of anything serious happening. It was starting to feel less like a misunderstanding, and more like something being hidden, or worse, something that had never existed at all. Still, I wasn't ready to accept that. Not completely. I needed something more concrete, something I could hold on to as proof. So I began to pay closer attention to the details I had ignored before. I replayed my uncle's words in my head, focusing on the way he had spoken, the pauses, the lack of specifics. At the time, I had been too caught up in the urgency to question anything. But now, every missing detail felt important. He never said who was sick. Not once. He never mentioned a hospital name, a doctor, or even a location. Everything had been vague, wrapped in urgency but lacking substance. It was as if the situation had been designed to make me act quickly, without thinking too deeply. That realization made my chest tighten. I stood up and began pacing the room, trying to organize my thoughts. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started to shift into a different picture, one I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore anymore. If there was no emergency, and no one in the family knew anything about it, then there was only one explanation left. The call had been a lie. I stopped walking and stood still, letting that thought settle in. It felt heavy, almost unreal. This wasn't a stranger, or someone distant. This was my uncle. Someone I had trusted without hesitation. Someone I had helped without asking questions. Why would he do that? That question lingered, unanswered. But it pushed me to keep digging. If the emergency wasn't real, then there had to be another reason he needed the money. Something big enough to make him lie. Something urgent enough to make him act the way he did. I picked up my phone again, this time not to call anyone, but to search. I opened social media and started scrolling through posts from family members. At first, everything looked normal: photos, updates, nothing unusual. But then, something caught my attention. A post from a distant relative, shared just a day after I had sent the money. It was a picture of my uncle, smiling, standing in what looked like a decorated hall. The caption read something about big plans coming soon, and exciting celebrations ahead. At first glance, it seemed harmless. But when I looked closer, I noticed details I hadn't paid attention to before: the decorations, the setup, the atmosphere. It didn't look like anything related to a hospital or an emergency. It looked like an event. I felt a chill run through me as I kept scrolling. More posts appeared, each one adding another piece to the puzzle. Someone mentioned venue bookings. Another talked about outfits being prepared. There were hints, small but clear, that something big was being planned. And all of it seemed to start right around the time I had transferred the money. My breathing slowed as the realization began to take shape. This wasn't random. It wasn't a coincidence. The timing was too perfect, too aligned to ignore. The money I had sent, the sudden activity, the excitement building around him, it all pointed in one direction. He hadn't been dealing with a crisis. He had been preparing for something else, something expensive. I lowered my phone slowly, my mind racing faster than before. The truth was still incomplete, but it was becoming clearer with every second. The emergency had never been about saving a life. It had been about something entirely different. And whatever it was, it had been important enough for him to lie to me without hesitation. And that was the moment the first real crack appeared in everything I thought I knew about him. A few days passed after I started connecting the pieces, but nothing prepared me for what arrived that afternoon. I had just come home, still carrying the weight of unanswered questions, when I noticed an envelope placed neatly near my door. It stood out immediately, not just because I wasn't expecting any mail, but because of how elegant it looked. Thick paper, a smooth texture, and my name written in careful, stylish lettering. It didn't feel ordinary. I picked it up slowly, turning it over in my hands. There was no return address, just a gold seal pressed firmly on the back. For a moment I hesitated. Something about it made me uneasy, like I already knew opening it would confirm everything I had been trying to deny. But curiosity pushed me forward. I broke the seal and slid the card out. The moment I saw the contents, my heart sank. It was a wedding invitation. Not just any wedding, a grand, luxurious one. The design was elaborate, filled with gold patterns and formal script. Every detail spoke of elegance and expense. My eyes moved quickly across the names printed on it, and there it was. My uncle's name, bold and clear, right at the center. I stared at it in disbelief. For a few seconds, my mind went completely blank, as if it refused to process what I was seeing. Then, slowly, everything began to click into place. The emergency call, the urgency, the exact amount he had asked for, the silence afterward, and now this, an expensive wedding invitation, arriving just days later like nothing had happened. I lowered myself into a chair, still holding the card tightly. My thoughts started racing, each one sharper than the last. This wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. The timing was too precise, too perfectly aligned to ignore. He had asked for $25,000, claiming it was life or death, and now, here he was, hosting a luxury wedding. The realization hit harder this time because it wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof staring me in the face. I looked closer at the invitation, reading every detail carefully. The venue was one of the most expensive in the area, known for hosting high-end events. The date was set for just a few days ahead. Everything about it screamed planning, preparation, and significant financial investment. This wasn't something arranged overnight. It had been in motion for weeks, maybe even months. Which meant one thing. When he called me that night, he already knew about the wedding. He already knew exactly where that money would go. A wave of anger rose in my chest, stronger than anything I had felt before. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the lie. The way he had used real fear to make me act without thinking. He hadn't just asked for help. He had manipulated me into giving it. I stood up and began pacing again, the invitation still in my hand. Every step felt heavier, every thought more intense. I replayed his voice in my head, the desperation, the urgency. Now it sounded different. Not genuine, but calculated, controlled. Like he knew exactly what to say to make me believe him. I stopped and looked down at the card again. This wedding, this entire event, it felt different now. What should have been a celebration looked like something else entirely. Something built on a lie. Something I had unknowingly helped fund. And the worst part? He had invited me. I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. The irony was almost unbelievable. After everything, he still had the confidence to send me an invitation, as if I would show up, smile, and pretend nothing had happened. As if I would sit there, watching him celebrate, knowing exactly how he got the money to pay for it. It wasn't just careless. It was bold. Almost like he believed I would never question him. That thought made something inside me shift. The confusion and doubt that had been clouding my mind started to clear, replaced by something much more focused. Clarity. For the first time since that phone call, I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't trying to figure things out. I knew. I walked over to the table and placed the invitation down carefully, staring at it as if it were evidence in front of me. Because that's exactly what it felt like. A piece of the truth, laid out plainly, impossible to ignore. The more I thought about it, the more details started to stand out. The expensive venue, the timing, the social media posts I had seen earlier, all of it pointed in the same direction. This wasn't just a simple wedding. It was a carefully planned, high-cost event. And somehow, my money had become a part of it. A deep sense of betrayal settled in. I had trusted him completely. I hadn't asked questions. I hadn't hesitated, and he had taken advantage of that without a second thought. Not just for something necessary, not even for something understandable, but for a celebration, for appearances, for something that could have waited or been managed honestly. Instead, he chose to lie. I picked up the invitation again, running my fingers over the embossed letters. It felt heavier now, not because of the paper, but because of what it represented. This wasn't just an invitation to a wedding. It was an invitation to witness the result of his deception, and he expected me to attend. That idea stayed with me, lingering longer than anything else. Because deep down, I knew one thing for certain. If I did go, it wouldn't be to celebrate after receiving the invitation. I couldn't ignore the situation anymore. What had once felt like a confusing misunderstanding was now something much clearer and much harder to accept. Still, I needed more than just assumptions. I needed proof, something solid that connected everything together beyond doubt. So instead of reacting emotionally, I decided to take a step back and start looking at everything carefully, like putting together pieces of a puzzle. I began with the timeline. I opened my bank app and checked the exact moment I had transferred the $25,000. The date and time were still there, unchanged, a quiet reminder of how quickly I had acted that night. Then I started matching it with everything else I had seen so far. The social media posts, the hints about celebrations, the photos that had caught my attention earlier. They all seemed to appear right after that transfer. That connection didn't feel random. I moved on to social media again, this time paying much closer attention. I wasn't just scrolling anymore. I was observing. I checked my uncle's profile first. It was mostly quiet, which itself felt strange considering what I now knew. But when I looked at posts from other relatives and mutual connections, a different picture started to form. There were photos of venue visits, short clips of decorations being tested, even casual posts about big days ahead. None of them directly said wedding, but the context was obvious. And the dates kept lining up. Each post, each update, seemed to follow right after the night I sent the money. It was subtle, but consistent enough to stand out. I zoomed in on one picture in particular, a decorated hall with soft lighting and floral arrangements. It looked expensive, far beyond something simple or last minute. That kind of setup required planning, deposits, coordination, money. I leaned back, trying to process everything I was seeing. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. The pattern was too clear to ignore. My money hadn't gone toward any emergency. It had gone into something else entirely, something planned, something deliberate. Still, I wanted something more concrete. Social media could be misleading, and I knew that, so I decided to go further. I searched for the venue listed on the invitation. It didn't take long to find it online. The moment I saw the official photos, everything became even clearer. The place was known for hosting luxury weddings and high-end events. The pricing alone was enough to confirm what I had already started to believe. This wasn't a simple family gathering. It was a major, expensive celebration. I checked reviews, packages, and booking details. Everything pointed to the same thing. This kind of event required significant upfront payment. It wasn't something you could arrange casually or without financial planning. Which brought me back to that night. The urgency, the exact amount, the timing. It all started to feel less like coincidence and more like strategy. I closed the website and sat in silence for a moment, letting the realization settle in. My thoughts weren't scattered anymore. They were focused, sharp, and directed toward one conclusion. He hadn't just lied, he had planned the lie. That idea changed everything. I picked up my phone again and went back to the messages I had sent him. Still unread. No response. No explanation. Nothing to suggest that he even intended to acknowledge what had happened. It was as if, once the money was transferred, I no longer mattered. That thought stung more than I expected. I wasn't just a relative to him. I had been a solution. A quick answer to a financial problem. And once that problem was solved, there was no need to maintain the act anymore. I stood up and started pacing again, but this time, my movements were slower, more controlled. The anger was still there, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was steady, building into something more deliberate. I wasn't reacting blindly anymore. I was thinking, carefully. If he had gone to this extent to hide the truth, then confronting him privately wouldn't change much. He would deny it, avoid it, or come up with another excuse. The pattern was already clear. He didn't expect to be questioned, which meant if I wanted answers or justice, I had to approach this differently. I walked back to the table where the wedding invitation still lay. It looked the same as before, elegant, polished, perfect. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't just an invitation. It was an opportunity, an opening. I picked it up and read the details again, this time with a completely different mindset. The date, the time, the location. Everything was clear, organized, carefully planned. This wasn't just a personal event. It was public, filled with family, friends, and people who believed they were attending a genuine celebration. People who had no idea what had actually happened behind the scenes. That realization gave me pause. Because the truth wasn't just mine anymore. It was something that had been hidden from everyone else as well. And if I chose to reveal it, it wouldn't just affect him, it would change how everyone saw him. I placed the invitation back down slowly, my mind now moving in a new direction. This wasn't about reacting emotionally or demanding answers in private. That wouldn't be enough. Not after everything I had uncovered. If he had used a lie to create something this big, then the truth deserved to be revealed in a place just as big. And for the first time since this all began, I knew exactly where that place would be. The day of the wedding arrived faster than I expected, yet every moment leading up to it felt stretched, heavy with anticipation. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time before leaving, adjusting my outfit, trying to steady my breathing. On the outside, everything about me looked composed, calm, even confident. But inside, there was a quiet tension building, something controlled but powerful. I wasn't going there as a guest. I wasn't going there to celebrate. I was going there with a purpose, and that purpose had been carefully shaped over the past few days. The venue was exactly as I had imagined. Grand, polished, and full of life. As I stepped inside, I was immediately surrounded by soft lights, elegant decorations, and the sound of music blending with laughter. People moved around in beautifully chosen outfits, smiling, greeting each other, completely unaware of the truths hidden beneath the surface of the event they were attending. For a moment, I simply stood there, taking it all in. Every detail confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just expensive, it was carefully curated, designed to impress. I walked further inside, my eyes scanning the room. Family members, distant relatives, familiar faces all gathered to celebrate him. Some of them noticed me and waved, their expressions warm and welcoming. I returned their smiles politely, playing my part perfectly. No one could see what I was carrying inside. And that was exactly how I wanted it. This wasn't the moment yet. Timing mattered, and I wasn't going to rush it. Then I saw him, standing near the center of the room, dressed perfectly for the occasion, smiling as he greeted guests one by one. He looked relaxed, confident, completely at ease, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't made that desperate call, hadn't taken that money, hadn't disappeared without a word. For a brief second, anger rose sharply within me, but I forced myself to stay still, to stay focused. This wasn't about reacting emotionally. This was about control. He hadn't noticed me yet, and I didn't approach him. Not now. Instead, I moved quietly through the crowd, observing everything. I listened to conversations, caught pieces of laughter, watched how people interacted with him. Everyone saw him the same way I once did. Trustworthy, reliable, someone worth celebrating. That image stood strong in front of them, untouched by the truth. And that's exactly why this moment mattered. I found a seat toward the side of the hall, close enough to see everything clearly, but far enough to remain unnoticed. From there, I had a perfect view of the stage, where the main ceremony and speeches would take place. I already knew this would be the moment I had been waiting for. Not during the chaos of arrivals, not during casual conversations, but when all attention was focused in one place. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching as the event continued. The ceremony unfolded beautifully, just as planned. Music filled the hall, soft and emotional. Guests watched with admiration, some even visibly moved by the atmosphere. I remained still, my focus unshaken, my thoughts clear. Every second brought me closer to the moment I had prepared for. Then came the transition. The formalities began to shift toward speeches. People gathered more closely, their attention naturally drawn toward the stage. This was the part where emotions were shared, where gratitude was expressed, where the couple would speak about their journey and thank those who supported them. I felt my heartbeat slow down, not speed up. That surprised me. Instead of nervousness, there was clarity. Everything I had planned, everything I had thought through, was now right in front of me. There was no hesitation left. He stepped onto the stage, taking the microphone with a confident smile. The room grew quiet almost instantly. All eyes were on him. He began speaking, his voice steady, warm, filled with gratitude. He thanked the guests, the family, everyone who had contributed to making the day special. His words were smooth, practiced, perfectly delivered, and yet every sentence felt hollow to me. I watched him carefully, noticing the way he carried himself, the ease in his expressions. There was no sign of guilt, no hesitation, no trace of the lie he had built everything on. If I didn't know the truth, I would have believed him completely, just like everyone else in that room. But I did know, and that changed everything. As he continued speaking, I reached into my bag and touched the folder I had brought with me. Inside were the printed details, the bank transfer confirmation, the call records, the timeline I had carefully pieced together. I didn't take them out yet. I didn't need to. Just knowing they were there was enough. The room remained silent, focused entirely on him. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Not just because of the attention, but because of what it represented. This was his peak. The point where everything he had built stood tall in front of everyone. And that's when the truth would matter the most. I stood up slowly, my movements small but deliberate. At first, no one noticed. Their attention was still fixed on the stage, but as I took a few steps forward, closer to the center of the room, a few heads began to turn. The shift was subtle, but it was enough. My focus never left him. He was still speaking, still smiling, unaware of what was about to happen. For a brief second, I paused, not out of doubt, but to let the moment settle. Everything had led to this. Every question, every realization, every piece of truth I had uncovered. Now, it was time to bring it into the light, and I was no longer just a silent guest in the crowd. I took another step forward, and this time, more people noticed. The quiet focus that had filled the room began to shift slightly, like a ripple moving through still water. My uncle was still speaking, thanking guests, smiling as if everything in his life was perfectly in place. But that moment was about to change. "Before you continue," I said, my voice clear enough to cut through the microphone's echo. The room froze. At first, it was just a brief pause, the kind people make when they think someone might be joking or adding something light to the moment. But when I didn't smile, when I didn't step back, the silence deepened. My uncle turned his head toward me, confusion flickering across his face. He hadn't expected this. No one had. "I think you're forgetting to thank someone," I continued, walking closer to the stage. Every step I took felt steady, controlled. There was no shaking in my hands, no hesitation in my voice. The emotions that had built up over the past days had settled into something sharper, focus. Around me, guests began whispering, trying to understand what was happening. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable. But no one interrupted. My uncle forced a small laugh, gripping the microphone tighter. "Of course," he said quickly, trying to regain control. "We're thankful to everyone here. I'm talking about the $25,000, I interrupted. The words landed heavily, cutting through the room like a sudden crack. The whispers stopped instantly. The air felt different now, tense, uncertain, charged with something no one had expected to witness at a wedding. I stopped a few feet away from the stage and looked directly at him. His expression had changed completely. The confidence was gone, replaced by something much harder to hide. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just stared at me, as if trying to figure out how much I knew. "You told me it was a medical emergency," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You said it was life or death, that someone needed urgent help." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, holding it up just enough for those closest to see. The simple gesture drew more attention, more curiosity. People leaned slightly forward, their focus shifting from celebration to confrontation. "You called me in panic," I continued. "You asked for $25,000, and I sent it without asking questions. Because I trusted you." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Some guests looked at my uncle, others at me, trying to piece together what was unfolding. His bride, standing beside him, turned slowly, her expression no longer filled with joy, but with confusion and concern. "What is she talking about?" she asked quietly. Though the microphone picked up just enough for others to hear, he didn't answer her. Instead, he tried to smile again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't the time or place for this," he said, his tone lower now, strained. "We can talk about this later." "No," I replied immediately. "This is exactly the time and place." The firmness in my voice removed any doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this wasn't a joke, this was real. I opened the folder and took out the printed papers, holding them so they were visible. "This is the bank transfer," I said. "The exact amount you asked for, the exact time you called me, and the exact moment the money was sent." I didn't need to show every detail to everyone in the room. The fact that it existed was enough. The weight of it shifted the entire atmosphere. "You said it was for an emergency," I added, my eyes never leaving his. "So tell everyone here, what was the emergency?" The question hung in the air. No one spoke. No one moved. Every eye in the room was now fixed on him, waiting. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. The bride looked at him again, this time more directly. "Answer her," she said, her voice sharper now. "What is she talking about?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The confidence he had earlier was completely gone. Whatever explanation he had prepared, if he had any at all, wasn't enough for this moment. Not in front of so many people. Not with the truth laid out so clearly. "This is ridiculous," he finally said, trying to sound dismissive. "She's confused. There's been a misunderstanding." I shook my head slightly. "Then explain it," I said. "Explain why no one in the family knows about this emergency. Explain why the money was transferred just days before this wedding. Explain why you disappeared right after you got it." Each question hit harder than the last. The murmurs returned, louder this time. Guests began turning to each other, whispering, questioning. The energy in the room had completely shifted. What was supposed to be a celebration had turned into something else entirely. Something uncomfortable, something real. His bride stepped back slightly, her expression now a mix of shock and disbelief. "Is this true?" she asked him, her voice unsteady. "Did you take money from her like this?" He looked at her, then at me, then back at the crowd. There was nowhere left to hide. The lie that had worked so easily over the phone now felt weak, exposed under the weight of so many eyes. "I was going to pay it back," he said quickly, the words coming out rushed, defensive. "It wasn't like that. I just needed help." "For what?" I interrupted again. "For this?" I gestured around the room, the decorations, the lights, the entire setup that now felt less like a celebration and more like evidence. "You didn't save a life," I said quietly. "You funded a lie." The impact of those words spread through the crowd instantly. Faces changed. Expressions hardened. The excitement that had once filled the room was gone, replaced by tension and disbelief. No one was celebrating anymore. They were watching the truth unfold in front of them. The moment I said the words, the entire room seemed to shift. It wasn't loud chaos at first. It was something worse. Silence mixed with disbelief. People looked at each other, trying to confirm what they had just heard, as if they needed collective permission to accept it. My uncle stood frozen on the stage, gripping the microphone like it was the only thing keeping him steady. His face had lost all its earlier confidence. Now it was tight, strained, and pale in a way I had never seen before. His bride slowly stepped away from him, her eyes fixed on his face as if searching for any sign that this was a misunderstanding. "Tell me this isn't true," she said softly, but the microphone carried her voice through the hall. It wasn't anger, yet it was shock. The kind of shock that comes when reality refuses to match the image you've built in your mind. My uncle tried to speak, but nothing came out at first. He cleared his throat, adjusted his posture, and forced a nervous laugh that didn't belong in that moment. "This is being exaggerated," he finally said, but even he sounded unsure of his own words. "It's not what it looks like." But the room had already changed. The energy was no longer celebratory. Guests who had been smiling moments ago were now focused, alert, whispering to each other in low, urgent tones. The attention wasn't on the wedding anymore, it was on the confrontation happening in front of them. I stayed where I was, holding the folder steady. I didn't need to raise my voice anymore. The truth was already in the room and everyone could feel it. "Then explain it," I said calmly. "Explain why you called me in panic. Explain why you said someone was dying. And explain why no one in your family knows anything about it." Each question made it harder for him to maintain control. His eyes flicked around the room, searching for support, but there was none. Even his closest relatives looked confused now, their expressions slowly shifting from disbelief to concern. One of the guests stood up from their seat. "Wait, what emergency?" someone asked from the crowd. That single question broke something open. Others began asking similar things. Voices overlapping. Confusion spreading quickly. The atmosphere that had been carefully built for celebration was collapsing in real time. His bride turned back to him again, her voice sharper now. "Did you lie to her?" she asked directly. "Did you take money from her?" The question hit harder than anything else so far because it wasn't coming from me anymore. It was coming from her, from the person who was supposed to trust him the most that day. My uncle looked at her, and for the first time, there was no performance left in him. No charm, no confidence, no carefully chosen words. Just silence and panic. I needed help," he finally said, but it came out broken. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." That answer only made things worse. Murmurs turned into clearer reactions. People were no longer just listening. They were reacting. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked disappointed. A few even stood up to get a better view, as if they needed to see the truth more clearly to believe it. I took a small step forward. "Help with what?" I asked. "Because you didn't use it for an emergency, you used it for this wedding." I gestured around the hall again. The decorations, the lighting, the setup, it all suddenly looked different through the lens of what everyone now knew. It wasn't just a celebration anymore, it was evidence. His silence stretched longer this time. No excuses came. No explanation followed. Only the sound of people shifting in their seats, whispering, processing. Then someone from the audience said quietly, "She showed bank records." That single statement changed everything. Proof had been mentioned. Evidence had been introduced. And once that happened, denial lost its strength. His bride stepped back completely now, putting distance between herself and him. "You told me everything was fine," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You said there were no problems." He reached out slightly toward her, but she didn't move closer. "I can explain," he said quickly. "Just not like this." But it was already too late for explanations. The damage wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about deception, about a story that had been built so carefully that it collapsed in seconds when challenged. A relative from the crowd spoke up again, louder this time. "Did you really take money from her?" My uncle looked around the room, realizing he had lost control of the narrative. Every face was now waiting for honesty, not excuses. And for the first time since I had known him, he didn't have an answer ready. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy. It carried everything that had just been exposed. The wedding was no longer a wedding. It had become something else entirely, a public unraveling. A moment where appearances broke apart and truth stood in the middle of it. Impossible to ignore, impossible to reverse. And in that silence, everyone understood that nothing about this day would continue the same way again. What happened at that wedding didn't just expose a lie. It changed how I see trust, family, and silence itself. I went there expecting answers, but what I got was a truth that couldn't be ignored or undone. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or drama. It was about refusing to stay quiet when something was wrong, even when the truth came from someone I never expected to doubt.